Now I'd like to introduce another big name in Boulder and around the world. So my last boss before taking a job with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Brett KenCairn, who's the lead of the nature-based solutions team for the city of Boulder's Department of Climate Initiatives. And so Brett I can't think of anyone better to give a little more global context about why things like our summits and the issues that we're concerned of are really important.
Thanks, Adrian. I want to just start by acknowledging that we are on the unceded homelands of many different ancestral and indigenous people, the Cheyenne, the Ute, the Arapaho, and many others, that there is an immense legacy of care and attention and stewardship of all the things that we're talking about in those communities, which still exist and are still here and with us, and so we should honor them and respect them as a part of this important conversation, and also to all the other beings unseen and seen that are with us in one way or another. I hope that they will bring their wisdom and blessings to this effort. So thank you all so much for being here. Thanks to the remarkable work of all of the people who've put this together. I wanted to just set the stage a little bit today by talking a little bit about where we've been in the last 10 years, where we are, and where, at least at the city, we are trying to go. So remember, it wasn't that long ago, in fact, it was 2013 that we had this remarkable, almost biblical event here. So 10 years ago, we were literally still very much in the process of recovering from this. About a year before this conference, we had a remarkable wind event that actually was so dramatic. This slide here, this picture here on the right, is the city owns this property that's just to your left. This is a fence line. This is like an Oklahoma Dust Bowl event. There were basically 3 inches of topsoil and bee horizon that were just blown to the east off of that site. We, of course, have come to see that these winter extreme wind events are not an anomaly. You might remember what else was going on about 10 years ago. We had very different leadership in the country. And about 10 years ago, we had this sort of epic global moment where it seemed like we were actually all going to come together as a globe and solve one of what we thought of at the time as major existential crises that we were facing. It was kind of like, yes, we're on an upward trend here. We actually at the city just published our newest climate action. It took us almost 6 years to develop this new climate commitment, which we published in 2015. That actually set the stage for the work that we're doing now. It was the first time that we add an ecosystem section in our climate action program. We didn't have a lot to say there yet, but we at least put a placeholder there. But that simultaneous to all that focus, in fact, I like to say that the climate movement kind of swallowed the rest of the environmental movement for the last 10 or 15 years. Simultaneous to all that, the UN is in the background saying, there are other problems that we're facing here. 70% of the global land area is deeply degraded. And in fact, if you look at the numbers from a variety of different perspectives, what you get is that we're living on a planet that's operating at something like 50% of its fundamental primary productive capacity. When we heard those stories about the skies were black with carrier pigeons, or the rivers were so full of salmon that you could walk across them, those weren't metaphors. Those were actually real stories about what the planet is like when it's operating at its full biological capacity. That's the world that we have lost. But for me, the intrinsic hope that I carry with me is that that's the world we can have back, because the living world is so capable of restoring itself when we enter into some sort of functional, what is this one? I didn't remember this one being here. It's because one of the things that we started to realize even about climate action was that it wasn't just about technology and burning carbon. It was actually about the fact that we had been degrading landscapes. In fact, more than half probably of the excess carbon in the atmosphere didn't come from burning fossil fuels. It came from land degradation. So that's the context of the world we need to start changing. But of course, there were other signals that were coming out about 10 years ago. This was probably the second major wave of our recognition of what was happening in biodiversity. We'd seen it in 2006 with the first bee colony collapses, and then it was starting to happen again in 2015. And so, you got to live in Boulder. Things start happening here. You have the bee chicas. You have people saying, look, we're not going to just stand for that or sit for that. We're going to stand up and we're going to actually create bee-safe neighborhoods. Some of these folks are in the audience today. God bless you for this work that you started in our communities, making this happen. Thank you. And then the other thing that we haven't been paying much attention to, because of course everything is about climate, is that there are other things that we've been doing that aren't very good for the planet either, including the massive increase in the amounts of these different kinds of chemicals that are coming out. And, of course we are concerned about certain things like West Nile, and so, well, we should be spraying for that, right? Well, actually, the city thought there might be a different way. And so because of you, because of our community, we started a new integrated pest management program that was based on ecosystems management, not chemical management. And so I'm not going to expect that you read all this. Thank you. And thank you to Rella Abernathy and many of the people in this room who actually carried this in so many ways that you have never seen. It is a very difficult task to push against the tide of what people think is the right thing to do. But what we have shown is that, in fact, this is the vector index. This is the amount of mosquitoes carrying West Nile virus in the city of Boulder across the last 4 years. Here's the West Nile virus vector for the other areas around us that are spraying chemicals. Interesting, right? This is what happens when you have fully intact ecosystems that can actually manage things through natural predation. Now, this is not an isolated thing in Boulder, of course. This is a movement. And I think that one of the things I'm trying to sort of convey to you is that this is a very important time for us to not only work locally, but also to come together with all those around the world who are doing this. The UN came out with this very important document in 2022 that started to lay out a framework for what nature-based solutions would look like. And I would strongly recommend reading this. This is sort of like my Bible. It's such a beautifully done piece. And then we've been trying to build on that by creating relationships and conversations with other places. So in fact, you've missed the first two, but there are two more really interesting biodiversity and urban community sessions. The next one's next week, November 20th, where Boulder will be co-presenting with Barcelona and Quito, Ecuador, about biodiversity and human health. And then December 4th, we'll have another one that's about biodiversity and food security in all kinds of interesting places around the world. Please participate in these, because not only do we need what's going on in the other places, there's a lot that we have to share with other places too. So I want to close by just encouraging you, encouraging me, encouraging all of us. We have to think bigger, and we have to start acting bigger. When I did the slide, I thought, bigger. Well, that's not a very erudite term, but it is. We need to act and think in a bigger way. So I want to take you through how we're trying to do that in Boulder. And one of the first things I want to share with you are some of the tools that we now have, which we didn't have just a few years ago, to see our living systems at scale in an urban environment. Think about our urban environments. Have we ever really thought about them as systems? No, we think about them if it's a park over here or maybe a greenway over there. We don't even try to manage them as a system. I'm looking at Eileen. She knows exactly what I'm talking about here. But we need to. If we want these systems to work with us, we have to work with them as larger communities. And so one of the things we could do is to start now seeing it as a larger community. You can't see this very well, but every little green dot in here is actually a tree. You can now see every tree in Boulder. So this is a little bit bigger image of this. Now, what's also interesting about this, you can see the dynamics of corridors now, right? See all these? Well, what are they corresponding to? They're corresponding to greenways and wetlands and other places that grow more vegetation. Those are incredibly important biologically, hydrologically, community, and socially. We can start to see that, if you'd asked our urban forester 5 years ago, what's the urban canopy in Boulder, she would have said 20% or maybe 16%. Because that was the average number for Boulder. Are averages useful here? Not at all. In fact, there are many parts of Boulder, can you know which parts of Boulder I'm talking about, they're at 40 or 50% canopy. And then, of course, you have Orchard Grove and other places. What do you think their canopy is? Maybe 15, 20%. That's life or death differences when it comes to heat in the world that we're living into. But we can change that. In fact, we can also see how it's changing. So this is a map of this. These are census block groups. And we can see everything that's tan or brown lost canopy in the last 10 years. We didn't know this before. We didn't know where that was taking place. But I can see it actually even better. This is census blocks. I can see both, we can see both canopy and canopy change. This is parcels. Every tan or brown parcel here has lost tree canopy in the last 10 years. Now we start to know where we need to act. This is my neighborhood, in fact. This is our house. My wife Emily's in the audience. I hope she's not going to kill me for showing this. And we know what the canopy of every parcel in our neighborhood is, but I don't need to see that in a conceptual way. You can actually see it in a physical way. We can zoom in from this scale all the way out to and you can see, right? You could see where we need to act here. And so now what do we do? So we have this remarkable new member of our team, Lauren Friels, who's been figuring out with Orella and others how we actually create these planting kits so that if you've got a place here that could be taking on more biodiversity and shade and cooling and water absorption, here's what you do. And it's not just a garden in a box generically. Actually, we need to plan this for biodiversity. So we have a sort of pollinator version of this. We have a trees version of this. And now we're actually starting to take these, and by knowing what species we're going to include in here and working with smart people like Paul Auerbach, we can actually create what we call phenology gardens. We can use these gardens to tell us how climate is changing by saying, how are the bud bursts changing each year? How are the different things that are visiting it change each year? And we actually know something about the biodiversity of those because we know the associates, and we can use these to monitor biodiversity in our community. What I'm saying is we're on the cusp now of being able to see where we live as larger systems and act with those larger systems to create real change. This is the map now of the city where we've started to identify where our critical areas of vulnerability are to heat and other things, and we can now start targeting our actions as we are to working with those parts of our community to make those changes. But remember, who controls the land? This is a map of Boulder. The public side of my side of this doesn't control very much. We're all the tan areas. Everything dark green, that's you. That's the rest of our community. That's the private sector. Therefore, we need some way that we can effectively bring everybody else into this game. And that's one of the reasons why several years ago, some of you hopefully have heard about it. Hopefully there's a table right out. Learn more about it. Cool Boulder. It's a community initiative of now over 60 organizations who are all working in some way to do this work. And we have very simple, straightforward strategies. Just three big parts: connected canopies, pollinator pathways, and absorbent landscapes. And there's activities that are going on in each, and there's a lot of resources there. So go to coolboulder.org. And the reason I'm mentioning this is not to try to crow about it, just to say every community needs some mechanism to invite the rest of the community to be a part of this process. And so one of the things that we're doing this year is also to try to elevate this by launching something that we're calling the Climate Resilient Landscapes Showcase. We decided to change it from challenge to showcase, in which we're going to invite people to put forward their nominations for the places they see around their neighborhoods where they think that this kind of work is taking place. And we're going to recognize over 150 of those places, and we're going to put $75,000 into three different projects, well, $25,000 a piece into three different projects across the community to advance this, because we need a new understanding of what these landscapes need to look like, right? So just to summarize where we're trying to go in this next year, we're really now moving out with all the things that we've learned, with all the things that you've been doing. We think it's time that we can create a community-based initiative where people can actually know what to do and that they can see what they're doing in the context of what everybody else is doing. This is just a very simple map, just a first rough draft that we're working on, where we're showing every tree that's planted, every action that somebody is taking, so that we can start to see ourselves as a part of this larger movement in our communities. So I'll close with just this. It's a big thing. We have to think big, but ultimately it's about one place at a time. So this was in September. Whoops. I just wanted to show you this picture from September, where we went to a school. Thank you, Adrian. There we go. Yeah, thanks. There we go. So we went to this school that had this really sad the whole landscape's kind of sad because the school district doesn't have the resources to actually do climate resilient landscaping. They need a community standing there with them to do that. And we're building systems, including sort of essentially management support, to start helping them do that. This is what we started with in the morning. And by the end of the day, we had completely planted that 3,000 square foot area in a way that not only is going to save 26,000 gallons of water a year and have a whole bunch more pollinator habitat, but all these people had really interesting experiences seeing themselves as a part of this larger community movement. That's what we need to create, is pathways forward and pathways into this work for all of us. So thank you so much for being here. I'm so grateful that you're all here, and I hope that we'll see you in various ways and in various garden plantings. Thanks.